All right, class. Let me get this started here. Okay, you can see me there. Perfect. Okay, so what we're going to get into now is a little bit of a pre lesson on our next topic, which is going to be the water cycle. Before we get into it, we need to make sure to take some appropriate notes, to draw appropriate diagrams, and have a decent understanding of what it is before we get into doing any activities or any collaboration in class. So, what I'd like you to do right now is just have a blank piece of paper handy, have a pencil, because I am going to be asking you to use that blank piece of paper here in a second. Okay, so getting into the water cycle. All right, so the water cycle, first let's go over the definition. The water cycle is the continuous movement of water on, above, and below the surface of the earth through four things: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and runoff. We're going to use the word collection instead of using runoff, and I'll explain that in a second. But on the right there, you'll see tools needed. Like I said, we are going to need a blank sheet of paper. We are going to need a pencil. So please take out that piece of paper now, and let's get into it. All right. So the four stages, kind of like I just mentioned, the four stages we have: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and collection. So on your blank sheet of paper now, we're going to draw a quick diagram with all four of these stages. Now, in order to draw that diagram, you will need a visual. So I'm going to present this visual to you right now. Now, I don't expect you to draw it as animated. I don't expect you to color it. I don't expect it to be perfect. What I do want from you to draw is, you see those arrows that are in a circle, kind of going in a counterclockwise circle. I do want to see all four words on there. So you can start with condensation on the top right, then make sure you draw an arrow connecting to precipitation, another arrow connecting to collection, and then another arrow connecting to evaporation, and back up to condensation. You don't need to draw all the stuff in the background, but I do need to see on your paper that there is a nice flow, a nice cycle leading from one stage to the next. Okay, so I'll give you a second to draw that. Okay, and then once you have that drawn, the next thing we're going to get into is each stage of that cycle. Um, Now, the order is kind of up to preference. I like to start with evaporation, because evaporation is comes from the sun's energy, when water's already sit in the collection area. So, evaporation, driven by the sun's energy, it's the process where water on the Earth's surface, so any sort of liquid, it turns into a gas or a water vapor. Now, usually, water evaporates from large bodies such as oceans, lakes, and rivers, and it's also on smaller puddles on the ground. And then plants also release water vapor into the air through leaves in a process known as transpiration. So, what I want you guys to do, in that first stage where you put, or the stage where you put evaporation on your water cycle sheet, or on your blank sheet of paper where you drew the four stages of the water cycle, I would like you to put a couple of these bullet points there right under evaporation to better understand what it is. So you can write that evaporation is the process where water turns from liquid to gas. I think that's the main point there that we want to make sure we have. If you want to pull examples and reference examples to make sure that you really understand it, you can put that it comes from oceans, lakes, rivers, and puddles. And then the last point, it's good to know, but I mean, you don't necessarily have to write the plants also release water vapor into the air, and what the name of the process is. But I want to make sure you have that evaporation is the process where water turns from liquid into a gas. Okay, and then put at least one example. Okay, so go ahead and take a second to do that. Put it underneath your evaporation on your diagram. Okay. Feel free to pause the video at any time if you need a little extra time to write some of these things, but I'm going to continue just for pacing purposes. So the next one we're going to get into is condensation. So you'll see a visual to the right. That's just one example of condensation. But condensation is when a water vapor rises into the atmosphere, and then the temperature cools, which changes the water vapor back into a liquid. And normally we see that in the terms of tiny little particles. and they're accumulated in the air, creating clouds and fog and things like that. But we see it, here on the surface. In this one example of water on the glass, that it is condensed. It is in those tiny water droplets, um, and that has to do with the temperature changing from uh, going into the cool atmosphere, and differences between hot and cold. So that does happen. Now, that is the next stage of the water cycle. So what I want you to, the important thing to write there is I want you to write that water vapor, let's see, condensation is when water vapor rises, temperature changes, um, forming it back into a liquid. So when water vapor forms back into a liquid through temperature changing in the atmosphere, I would say that's probably the best way to write it. And then again, if you want to put an example right below it, you can put that we see this in clouds and fog. Okay. Okay. So we've kind of gone over, two of the four processes in the water cycle. And again, it's cool because they all connect. Okay. And I'm gonna reference that connection once again at the end. So um, at any point, if you need to pause it again, please do so. Make sure that you have a good idea of each stage, because when we get into our lesson tomorrow, when you're into class, we're not going to spend as much time going over just the four stages, because that is prior knowledge that I am expecting you to have a good idea about. Okay. All right. Moving on to precipitation. Now, precipitation is probably the one you guys are most familiar with. When we think of precipitation, we think of rain, which is true. But it's not just rain. If you look at that diagram on the right, it can be rain, it can be snow, sleet, it can be hail. Okay, when water droplets fall from clouds, um, they can become too large and heavy for the air to hold. They fall back to the earth. Now, this can be done in, like I said, a bunch of different ways. Um, all I ask that you put here, precipitation is when water droplets fall from clouds towards the earth. That's basically the meaning of precipitation. Feel free to put all four examples if you'd like. I would actually encourage that. I know that all of us know about rain, but definitely put snow, sleet, and hail in there as well. Um, a pretty straightforward process, right? Precipitation, water falls down. It goes into our oceans, our lakes, our rivers, goes onto our ground, um, and then what that leads to, again, feel free to pause it, but what that leads to is collection. Okay. So I included this last diagram here on the right, and we're going to get into collection, but let's take a little quick recap here. We started with evaporation, which was the water from the collection. So from our rivers, from our lakes, from our oceans, and part of that water was evaporated. It went up into the sky. It condensed through the form of condensation because of the temperature changes, which helps forms our clouds. Now, once our clouds formed, there was a process of precipitation where it got too heavy for the air and it released water, it released hail, it released in any four of those types that you just wrote, and then it released it back down towards the ground, into our collection area. So again, into our rivers, our lakes, and our oceans. So um, very, very cool water cycle. Very cool, just way of that's the beauty of the world. It's just a way of things working in unison. One doesn't work without the other, or else it wouldn't be a cycle. Um, so again, last thing, collection here. Make sure that you have the notes on it. After falling to the earth, water collects in rivers, lakes, oceans, and aquifers. Okay, so it's again a collection it's the most straightforward process, right? When water hits the earth, it's where it collects. Hence collection. Um, and then I put some other points here that you can reference. Feel free to write as well. Precipitation may also be temporarily stored in snow, ice, and glaciers before melting and joining the rest of the cycle. And then water on the surface that flows into larger bodies of water is called runoff. This collected water is then ready to evaporate and start the cycle again. So, what a beautiful way to end it. Bring it all back. Show that last diagram to show that it is all connected. So, let's stop here. By now, you should have your blank piece of paper that was initially blank. It should have all four stages. You should have the arrows connecting the stages, and you should have about two or three bullet points or descriptions under each one, under condensation, precipitation, evaporation, and collection. Okay. Now, I don't expect you guys to be experts, but what I do hope is that we have a good understanding of how the cycle works, that we understand the process, and that when I reference some of these things in class, when I ask you guys to do collaborative activities, um, and when I ask you to work together for a project, that you guys are able to pull from this prior knowledge, that, this little mini lesson here, so that you can put your best foot forward with your classmates. Okay. So I want to say thank you. That's it for today. I'll see you guys all in class tomorrow. Make sure you bring your diagram so that you can reference it for our next activity. And I will see you all tomorrow.